If you're new here, my name is Ruth Ann. My husband Lance was a service connected, disabled U.S. Navy veteran. He was sick for 25 of the 27 years we were together, and for the last 12 years of his life, I was his full time caregiver. This podcast is about caregiving in all its forms. My friend Shawn is back for the final episode in this series that we're doing on him advocating for his neighbor, Robert, who has Alzheimer's and dementia. He shared a lot of stories in the previous 3 episodes that show how Alzheimer's changes a patient. And the last episode, he talked about finding Robert a safe place to live because he could no longer live in the remote location where he had been living. So today we're going to talk about some of the personality changes that Shawn has seen since he finally got Robert settled. Shawn, thanks for being here again and for being willing to share this story.
I'm glad to be back and join you, and let's do it.
Can you share with us how Robert's personality has changed because of the dementia and Alzheimer's, and how has that affected your relationship with him?
So in the beginning, when I first met Robert 7 years ago, he was different than he is now. He was much more organized, goal-driven, self-sustainable, everything. And then as this disease progressed, really started seeing a lot of changes in him from what he was back then and what he is now. And what he is now is a very dependent personality, not in his mind, but he has a real problem with a lot of things, a lot of decision-making problems. A lot of things kind of go wrong for him as he tries to do them, which ends up frustrating him. There's many things that frustrate him. He's very easily frustrated. I'm using that word, but that's the best thing to describe him. And one of the other things that can get him frustrated is struggling to communicate with others. And so what I've had to do is, first of all, kind of research Alzheimer's myself. I didn't go into great depth on it, but I needed to kind of know the bullet points of what to expect. What is he doing that is really stereotypical for Alzheimer's? And I went down the list, and he was doing nearly every single thing on the list. And there were other things on the list that maybe are to be coming up next. There are a lot more severe things. But right now, we're at the stage where he still remembers me very well, like very thoroughly remembers who I am. He does forget who some of the other people around him are. He does forget a lot of recent past events, but can remember his childhood like he's there right now. He can sing songs from his childhood that I don't think 7 years ago remembered these songs. And now all of a sudden his brain is rewiring, and it's going back. And the problem with that is it also goes back to maybe that personality he had when he was younger, maybe that hot-headedness when he was a 20-year-old versus now where he's in his late 70s. So I've seen a lot of changes, and he has always been a very honest man with me, but I've also seen a little bit of, I don't know if it's considered lying or if it's just in his mind that's the truth. I don't know if it's deception or if it's what he thinks is real. So this is a lot of, I don't know if you call cat and mouse games, but I'm about the only one around Robert that has figured out how to manage him so he doesn't get all frustrated with me. And I do have some pointers on that because I found out some things that really don't work and things that really work. But overall, I would say his personality is frustrated and then not. That's the biggest thing. And then other than the rest of the symptoms of forgetfulness and poor decision making, all that kind of stuff, it just leads to the frustration. And then he lashes out at everybody. And I have examples of that as well.
I would love to hear some of these examples, and I know that they would be valuable to our listeners.
I would have to say that a lot of his frustration problems and the real bad things have to do with his interactions with other people. And this can be everything from somebody in the grocery store, or somebody outside, or even talking with me, or he goes to the apartment manager's office because he's got an issue with his faucet or something like that. He just really struggles with people and communication. He's even had some real problems with some of the caregivers, not because the caregivers were bad. It's because maybe they didn't fully understand how to play the game with him. And when I say it's a game, it really is a game. And if you think that it's not a game, he'll one up you, and the whole situation will fall apart. So some of the examples where he would have issues is, for instance, his smoke alarm battery uh, got low, and so the smoke alarm started beeping. And so he got a makeshift stool and stood up real high, and he's balancing, and he just grabbed that smoke alarm, and he's trying to take it off, couldn't figure out how, and he just ripped it right out of the wall, like ripped it. Then he went to the apartment office, and it was still beeping. And he is very sensitive to noise, so he goes in there, and they got people who are looking to rent an apartment. They got customers, they got other people. So it's a real organized place. And he goes in there, this thing won't stop, and I need somebody to. And of course, they're not allowed to do any of this stuff. They have to call maintenance. This is a well-run apartment, but they have to cover all their bases. People can't haphazardly do maintenance. So the lady there, she got a hold of maintenance, and they said they'd be there after a while. And he goes, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And he's just yelling. He's just like hollering. So then I get a phone call. I'm working, and I get a phone call, and he has basically, if you guys have seen the movies where somebody's like barricaded themselves in their house and all the police are around, this was heading that way. She said that they were really close to calling law enforcement because he was hollering and would not leave and go back to his apartment and just let maintenance take care of this. And so I had to have her tell Robert that I'm going to be calling him. So I called him, and he was in there, and everybody's at a standstill. And I said, Robert, we can't talk here. I need you to go back to your apartment where they can't monitor us. I really need you to. And he goes, okay. And why did I have to do that? Why? Why such a lie? Well, because Robert, for a very long time, loves conspiracy books. He loves these things, and he tells everybody the moon landing was faked. He tells you who JFK was assassinated by. He tells you about aliens visiting Earth and what they do, and different types of aliens from outer space. He'll tell you all about that stuff, chemtrails, everything. So I knew that in order to keep the police from being called, I had to tell Robert They're monitoring us. You need to go to your apartment where they cannot monitor us. In his mind, because he had wired himself that way so much, that's exactly what he did. He left. He went to his apartment. Later, the maintenance guys came. They had replaced the battery in this smoke alarm and then fixed the wall where he had ripped it out. And they did all that without charging anything extra for it. But these are the games I have to play. The more severe the situation is, the more severe, I wouldn't say severe, but the more intense my strategy has to be. Now, other situations are they're really Alzheimer's related. He has actually been known to leave his apartment and go to the grocery store. You know, he does have his own credit card. It's very monitored and very lower limit, so he can't do a lot of damage. But you know, he feels very strongly that he's not living if he can't choose his food alone once in a while. So he does once in a while. He'll go across the street to the grocery store and pick out something he needs or he's short on right now. For the most part, the caregivers help him at the grocery store because they're able to go in their car and carry a lot of stuff. But you know, he does go over there, and this has been happening for 2.5 years now. So far it's been okay. But I went over to the grocery store, and apparently they all know him over there because he's had issues over there. You know, he will buy oranges and he'll take them home, and then if he peels an orange and it's got something wrong with it, like it's sort of black in the middle, he will leave his apartment. He'll go with that one orange all the way back across the road and demand a refund. And so as we look at his credit card statement, we monitor everything, you know, grocery purchases. We see these random refunds for like 89 cents or something. They all know him over there. And the absolute worst thing that has ever happened was when I go to the grocery store with him, I don't like to wait in the line. So I go through the self checkout and we go through everything. And once again, when I scan the club card to get the savings, and then I say, now use your card. He said, no, I don't want to pay twice. I said, no, this is the club card. We need to pay. And then he hollers, and then finally we pay and we leave. Well, apparently he thought at other times when he goes alone, now he's going to go through the self checkout. Well, apparently he has walked out of the store with items without paying because he didn't remember. He's not a dishonest man. He doesn't want to steal, and I'm positive of this. He's just absent-minded. So I did have to let the store know that he has Alzheimer's. Please forgive him for what he does, but yeah, these things are going to happen, so just keep an eye on it, you know. And the good thing is they didn't bust him for shoplifting. They just made him pay. And they kind of knew this about him. So I've had to craft everybody around him to manage his personality. And about 4 or 5 months ago, the caregiver service that has been going to his house has sold. And they sold to another lady who she called me and introduced herself. And they were really kind of not changing everything, but hitting it all with the new approach. And just to be honest with you guys, so far so good on that, because she came in and she said she as the owner does shifts with all of the clients so that she understands firsthand what's going on, and then she can send the correct personality to be with this person. And she was asking me, is there any problems or any issues? I said, yeah. I said, I'm trying to work and everything, and I'm having to drop everything and do all these things. And she said, well, we're going to do our best to try to help reduce the amount of effort you have in this situation. And I can tell you guys, since they've taken over, they have reduced my efforts drastically. They handle so many things. It is so good. But one of the things that was really good about this caregiver service is they didn't just come in and apply what they want to your person. What they did was they came in and they first said, we want to know more about Robert. Even before they went and saw him, they want to know some history. They want to know some stuff. And that was a relief. You finally have someone who listens to where you've been so far. And the amazing thing is they asked the right questions. They said, what makes him angry? They didn't make me fill out a questionnaire. They talked with me over the phone. And then we could elaborate on things, so it wasn't a lot of work for me to tell them. I told them what makes them angry. I told them, because if you don't listen to a custom tailored situation that needs to be applied to this person, you're going to do things that you thought were good and they're not good. For instance, Robert hates sports, absolutely loathes sports. So there are people that would recommend turning on the game, taking them to a game, talking about a game. No, don't do that with Robert. There are a few other things that set him off. It's not a giant list, but it's things that you would kind of think were nice. Hey, let's go out for ice cream. No, ice cream will kill you. There's a lot of things that you just, they got the list from me and really made a kind of a portfolio, a profile on him, so that every time they need to send a caregiver or adjust their plan or whatever, they got something to work with. And they went through all the things. So what does he like to do? I said, he likes to read his books. And I tried to keep all these conspiracy books from him. And a couple of years ago, I was advised by people who know what they're talking about, let him, if he has a happy place, let him be in his happy place if it's not hurting him. So he loves to read his books. He reads them day after day after day and reads them over and over and over again and makes notes inside of them. And that's his happy place. And they're like, well, does he like to go to the museum? No, he doesn't want to go anywhere. He doesn't want anything fun that normal people would say, that's fun. He wants none of it. What he needs, I told them, I said, what he needs routine. Number one, he does not like when things are moved. In the past, the caregiver would clean his counter and move the shaver, and the shaver would be over here a foot away, and Robert panicked, like he couldn't find it. And it's over there. Why is it there? And then one of the caregivers in the past brought his lunch, and he asked Robert, can I heat up my lunch in your toaster oven? And Robert hesitantly let him. And the guy did. And the reason he has a toaster oven, by the way, is because Robert's opposed to all microwaves. It said so in his books. But what he ended up doing was he as soon as the caregiver left for the day, Robert took the toaster oven into his bedroom and hid it in his clothes, in his bed and everything, just hid it in there. And then he let me know, because Robert's very honest with me about things that occur and how he reacted to it. So I said, Robert, I'm going to let them know not to use your toaster oven anymore, but I don't want you putting your toaster oven in your bedroom. Let's just get it back in your kitchen. And do you know why he really, really was bothered by the toaster oven thing? because he needs everything to be repeated the same every day. And the man who used his toaster oven turned the temperature dial to a setting that he needed and did not return it back to what Robert had it set at. So then when Robert went to cook his food, it wasn't set at the right temperature and it just set everything all off. And so I let the caregivers know he finds security in everything being routine, everything being known. Now I can change things up with him. I have that ability to do that. I'm the only one, I think, on earth that has that ability, apparently, because I took this man over to Tempe Town Lake and rented a pedal boat, which he's scared of water. He's never learned to swim. We got the life jacket on. I had one of them big, tough Arizona State University guys help get him on the pedal boat. And we went around and we had an amazing day. We went around here and there. And then I told Robert at any time we can head back. And we were out there 45 minutes on a pedal boat, which he had never been in his life. And he said, okay, I'm done now. And we pedaled back and we got out. And every single week or every single month, he mentions that day. It could have gone really badly, but I took a risk. But not everybody can take a risk with him. I would have turned the car around right away if it had even started going badly. But the reason I did some of this stuff is because I tried to give sort of an enhancement to his life in some way. I didn't need to do that, but I did it. And the reason I was able to pull it off is because I was able to manage his personality, his weirdness a little bit. The whole way there, we talked about conspiracy theories. And, another thing I'll tell you guys is when they get in a loop and they have a certain belief about something, or even where something is in their house, if they believe that a certain relative is still alive, but they're dead, and they start talking as if they're there, or I have found that it is absolutely best to play along. And I'm not talking about playing along where they get hurt, but I have found over and over that if you try to convince them otherwise, it doesn't go too good. And I have an example of this. Robert has worked at the prison for 27 years. He got a 30-year retirement. The reason he got, was only there 27 years is because he had so much comp time built up. And so when we were cleaning his house out, there's a placard that said, congratulations. It was from the state of California. It was congratulations on your 25 years of service. And that was before he had even left the prison. Well, ever since like 2 years ago, he started saying, instead of 27 years, he started saying 17 years. He started telling everybody he worked at the prison for 17 years. Now, when we were heading down, to go to move into his apartment, he had mentioned that he worked at the prison for 17 years. And I said, no, it was 27. He goes, no, you're wrong. I said, no, I said, do you remember the plaque that they gave you when you made it 25 years? He said, yeah. I said, well, 25 is greater than 17. So he had to think for a while, and he's like, oh, okay, maybe you're right. The next day, he said he worked at the prison for 17 years again. And so I corrected him, and he got super angry with me. And so I quit correcting him. And then from then on, he's always said he's worked there 17 years. And then he follows it up by, I know you think I worked there 27 years, but you're wrong. So trust me, you don't want to correct them. it not only can go badly, but then they don't forget. Sometimes you're like, they forget all this other stuff, but they remember the bad stuff, so you get that. And then I would say that going along with them the best they can, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to make them not only physically as comfortable as possible, but you're trying to make them mentally as comfortable. If they believe it, if something is a certain way, it doesn't mean it'll last. That belief will last forever, but often it can stick around a long time or forever. So I do that. I understand what sets him off. He has other things that are personal to him, like he doesn't like dogs coming up to him and jumping on him or something like that. He doesn't like when they bark nonstop. So there's a lot of things where if I'm taking him somewhere and it maybe gets too crowded or something, to kind of turn it around, turn it around. Let's get out of this situation. Not super fast, noticeable, but just, yeah, we're done here. Okay, we'll go somewhere else. So been doing a lot of stuff like that, and the new caregivers are amazing at doing that stuff. It's the first people I've ever heard of that are actually taking that kind of approach seriously. And that has been so effective with him.
We had a lot of caregivers in our home, and I dealt with a lot of home care agencies over the years. And what you're saying is something that I've never experienced with caregivers. We did have some great caregivers, but as far as an organization who managed them, that sounds really incredible. I'm so glad that you have that.
They have a whole new approach to how they deal with your loved one. And when I was talking with the owner, she was really expressing some real issues that people face. She said people are very, very quick to just send their loved one to a facility. They're very, very fast to do that. They can't deal with it, send them away. But she said what people don't realize is that these home care agencies can actually help even the transition towards that, especially if the end result, not the end game, but the end result is they do have to be in a care facility. Maybe they don't have to be in a care facility this minute. Maybe an agency like this, they can send people to this person's home where your loved one is already familiar with, where many of the things around them are what they need and they want. And so then the person comes into their environment and assists where they're lacking. And she said people don't realize that this is an option. It's a very viable option. And you know what else? She said they can adjust the plan. They can come once a week. They can come once a day. They can be there 8 hours a day. They can be there 16 hours a day. It's whatever the person needs. And sometimes when a person's used to living independently, they don't want people there all the time. But if you can set up a situation where, it's not ideal for them to be alone, but the alternative is for them to be in hell. So if you set up a situation where there's enough eyes on the situation, there's enough helping hands where need be, it can make a huge difference in the way someone goes through this awful process all the way to their death. And I would say, think about it, everyone. If you were to be in this situation, would you want to be put in a facility? You're in a bed and you're in, you got a lot of other people. You don't know who any of these people are. Or would you rather be at your home and maybe somebody comes there and just checks on you? I would have to say I'd love to be at home. because then I could go outside and see the same view, things like that. So I think they're amazing if they work right.
I think that is such great advice. And I think that your stories really help to show why it's so important to really live in that person's world, because everything that you've done to make things comfortable for Robert, you're doing what works best for him because this is his reality now. And realizing that his reality is different than actual reality is really, really important. I'm really curious though, how do you balance your role as Robert's advocate with your own life? And what would you do if it becomes unsustainable?
So currently, I'm still on 24/7 call with Robert. That means that if there's anything that goes wrong with him, either he's going to call me or others around him will call me. Fortunately, that hasn't been very often, I would say. It used to be, there were times it was 5 times a day. Now we've gotten to where it is maybe 2 or 3 times a week, which is more manageable for me. Part of the reason I get called is because either he can't get something resolved, the people around him who are trying to just aren't getting it done, or he just wants to tell me about something he read. And the problem with that, I do listen to him, but the problem with that is sometimes I'm in a meeting or I got a lot to do and I have to stop and listen to what he read. And it does affect me, but it's not the end of the world. That it's just not the end of the world, because if I delay him, then mentally I'm thinking, okay, I got to call him. That's kind of stressful. And also it's stressful for him. But some of the things he comes up with and he wants to tell me about, if you give him a few hours, he forgets he was going to call me anyway. So it kind of works out. But I would say that because I seem to be an anchor point for him in his life, it's like I'm the one that keeps him grounded for some reason. I have no idea how I got in this situation, because he has spent more of his life without me than with me. He is just about 79 years old right now, and I've known him 7 years of it. And he doesn't have anybody else. He has a son who hasn't seen him in 20 years. So I don't know if I adopted this guy or what, but he's been part of my life, and so he's on call. I had to turn his, on my phone, I've had to turn his ringtone to silent, because there are times when the call is inappropriate timing that I can't have it interrupt certain things, but I know he called and then I call him right back. But I basically still handle problems for him. And I would say this is all going to change in the future at some point. As his needs grow, we're going to up the caregiver hours some more. And if he gets in a situation where it is very likely he's going to get hurt or he's going to suffer in some way, he's going to be moved. And until then, we're just in a holding pattern. He's still, every day he wants to go home. Every day he wants to go home. And his house has been sold. There's other people in it. The money from the house is going to go to his care in the future. These facilities are very expensive and they're not covered by insurance. And because some in the industry in the know, have let me know that the non-compliant people, which Robert is, when you put him in a cage, he's not compliant. He is going to be very expensive. A minimum of $7,000 a month, could easily be $10,000 a month. The amount of money we got from his house is not going to go that far. But we're not going to worry about that right now. Right now, we're making him as comfortable as possible until that has to happen. And one of the things I wanted to mention to you is the games we got to play with Robert to convince him that where he is where he needs to be. Now, he's demanding to get out of there and move back home and everything, but we let him know. It wasn't just me, it was others. Let him know that he only has two choices. You're either going to be here in this apartment and these people are, these nice ladies are going to come and be with you once in a while, or you're going back to a facility. There is no other choice. And he's like, oh, there is no. I said, no. And you know what? I'm not lying about that, because in good conscience, and also if you think about it in the legal system, one cannot knowingly just kick someone to the curb that cannot sustain themselves and will likely hurt themselves or die. This is the only choice. Even according to his son, who I keep involved. You're either going to be here or you're going to be here. And he said, well, I don't want to be here anymore. So guess what I did? I said, okay, I've got a big long form, because I've already been through this before. I had to call his bluff. And I said, I got a big long form here I need to fill out. And I knew exactly what would set him off. I said, okay, your name, Robert, and this and that. Okay, now we're going to get down to the things that you like and don't like. Robert, what is your favorite baseball team? Baseball, sports. I said, well, no, they need to know, like, who's your favorite team? Who's your favorite football team? Are you okay with barking dogs? I mean, I had to say some stupid things. And then he's like, he was so upset about that. And I was doing this over the phone. So then he's like, he got mad and we ended the phone call. And then later that day, I get a call from Robert. He goes, well, I've made my decision. I want to stay here. I said, are you sure? Because I said, we already got things in motion to move you. No, I'm sure. This is where I want to be. And I said, okay, then you're going to be there. And I'll tell you what, we had 6 months where he didn't even ask to move out. Like, it was just straight 6 months apiece. And then because it's Alzheimer's, you have a tendency to get back in, you jump loops. You're in a loop and then you jump back into another loop and stuff like that. So we've had to revisit that another time, and then we had the same exact result. But you know what? Robert felt like he was in charge. He's like, I have option A or B. I don't like either of them, but I choose option A. I'm going to take control. I'm going to stay here. Okay. But it's all for the good, because I'm telling you, he would be in hell, in a facility. And I've already talked to some of these facilities, and they're almost considered lockup facilities. They're not 100% lockup, but he would feel that way, because they usually put like a wrist bracelet on them, and it'll set the alarm off if they head out the door, and they'll physically move them back into the place. It'll be like what he remembered in the prison system. In fact, with his Alzheimer's, he's actually called himself at times a prison guard and at times a prisoner. He has he did that so much as a career that he understands both sides of that, and he acts like a prisoner sometimes. But anyway, that's what needed to be done with him.
I want to comment on your choices that you give him, A or B. And I know that I had to do that with my husband. And I heard a lot of people say that that was really unkind to do that. But when you haven't dealt with dementia or Alzheimer's, you have no idea how hard it is to keep somebody in compliance, to keep them safe. You have to come up with these strategies. And if you look at any of the documentation on these diseases, that's what they tell you to do. So for people hearing these stories for the first time, this is not unkind to do this. This is a way to keep yourself sane for one, but also to keep them safe. That's number one. So wow, you've really been through a lot, Shawn. What do you hope that people get out of your story?
Well, I hope that others, when they hear this, are going to get a couple things. Number one, they're not alone. Some of these things that I've experienced, maybe you've experienced, maybe not exactly, but maybe you've had to play the games. Maybe you've had to really agree with their version of reality that isn't true, just to get through the situation, to get them calmed down. And the other thing is, I hope there's something I said that maybe you didn't know that is a strategy that you can take away from this that might help get you through a situation. For instance, like when he was a threat to society by driving, how we went on Amazon and ordered exactly the same car keys. So when he sat there in his chair, he saw those car keys, but those weren't the car keys that would make his car work. And, some of the other things that I mentioned may or may not work for you, but they're worth a try if you have no other choice. And I do not want to just outright lie to Robert, but if you think about the definition of what is a lie is something that is other than the truth. Well, the problem we have with Alzheimer's is, what is the truth? We know what the truth is. They have a different version of the truth. So then what is a lie in their eyes? What is it? So the end game here is not to deceive them, is not to hurt them. It's not to do anything bad. It's all about mitigating a horrible situation caused by a horrible disease.
Well, Shawn, thank you so much for being willing to share this story and for all that you have done and continue to do to advocate for Robert. He is so lucky to have you. I hope that when it gets to the point where I need care like that, or if it gets to that point, that I have somebody advocating for me like you. So thanks again. And I know that you and I will continue talking about this since we are friends. So as things change, maybe we'll have you back on again if you're willing to share some more stories.
All right. And if something major happens with Robert, you're one of the first people to hear about it. So Robert is a treasure trove of stories.
That he is. Thanks again, Shawn.
All right. Well, until next time.